Margaret and Tom Thompson thought they had done everything to keep their daughter Lily safe in their quiet, close-knit town. But on a warm summer evening, when 8-year-old Lily vanished without a trace, their lives shattered, leaving behind a mystery that haunted the town for decades. Years later, a cryptic journal, a hidden room, and disturbing revelations about a man they once trusted would bring them closer to the truth, closer to a darkness no one ever suspected lay so close to home. The autumn night was quiet, with only the faint rustle of leaves outside the Thompson family's home. They had just returned from a small dinner with friends, one of those cozy gatherings that helped close the chill of October. Lily, the youngest daughter, was only 8, a bright and gentle child with a soft smile and an almost endless curiosity. Her parents, Margaret and Tom, had tucked her into bed as they always did, unaware that this routine moment would become the last memory they'd have of her in their home. As the family drifted to sleep, the neighborhood settled into silence. The small town was the kind of place where neighbors looked out for each other, and no one locked their doors. It had always been safe, the kind of place where children played until dusk and families gathered at the community center on weekends. But in the early hours of the next morning, everything changed. When Margaret went to wake Lily, she found her bed empty. At first, she thought Lily had simply wandered into another room, perhaps to get a glass of water or look for a lost toy. But after a frantic search through every room and a call to Tom, the chilling reality set in. Lily was gone. Margaret noticed that the window was open, a cold breeze slipping into the room, and there on the windowsill was a single muddy footprint. It was too large to be Lily's, yet it suggested that someone had been inside. The Thompsons called the police, and soon the quiet neighborhood buzzed with officers, detectives, and neighbors. Flashlights scoured the yard, and people began whispering about what could have happened to the little girl. Some suggested that she might have wandered off, but others found the footprint troubling. Search teams, consisting of both local officers and volunteers from town, spent the day combing through the nearby woods. They even ventured down to the lake at the town's edge, a favorite spot where local children played during the summer. Yet by nightfall, there was still no sign of her. Days turned into weeks, with the police widening their search to surrounding towns, questioning anyone who might have seen or heard anything unusual that night. But the clues were scarce, and no one could remember seeing anything out of the ordinary. The footprint was the only evidence left behind, and its origin remained a mystery. No one could identify who it belonged to, and there were no fingerprints on the windowsill or inside the house. Lily had simply vanished, her absence leaving a profound silence. Rumors started to circulate, as they often do in small towns. Some speculated that Lily might have been taken by someone passing through, while others whispered about a nearby forest, long rumored to be haunted. The townspeople started locking their doors, and children were no longer allowed to play outside alone. The once peaceful town became gripped by an unspoken fear, each neighbor watching their own children a little closer, casting wary glances at the dense woods. As the weeks passed, the search efforts waned and hope began to fade. The case grew cold, but Lily's family held on to hope, praying for her safe return. They left her room exactly as it was, untouched by time, with toys neatly placed and her favorite stuffed bear resting on her pillow. Though her memory haunted the family, they clung to the possibility of a miracle, that one day she might come home. Decades passed, and the town moved on, its memories of Lily fading like an old photograph. Her family still lived in their modest house, but they had grown older, weighed down by years of grief and uncertainty. The pain of Lily's disappearance never left them, yet their lives continued in the quiet way that follows a tragedy too heavy to bear each day. Then, in 2014, during a construction project near the edge of the same forest where the search for Lily had once stalled, a discovery reopened her case in a chilling twist. The construction crew had been working on clearing land for a new road when they stumbled upon something buried deep beneath the roots of an old oak tree. At first they thought it was just a piece of old trash, perhaps a discarded item from one of the town's past residents. But as they looked closer, they realized it was a small, waterlogged journal, its leather cover cracked and worn. Inside, the pages were fragile, stained, and yellowed by age. The workers knew the town's history well enough to recognize the name etched inside the front cover, Lily Thompson. The journal quickly made its way to the police, and with it, Lily's case, long cold, suddenly burst to life. Investigators, many of whom hadn't been alive when Lily went missing, pored over the journal with fresh eyes. Inside, they found Lily's handwriting, a small child's script, shaky and slightly smudged, but legible. The early entries were simple, full of the ordinary musings of an 8-year-old girl. She wrote about her family, her friends at school, and her dreams for the future. But as they read further, the entries took a darker turn. Lily began to describe someone she called the man in the shadows. Her words painted a picture of a figure lurking at the edge of her world, watching her from afar, always present but never seen by anyone else. She mentioned strange feelings of unease, a sense of being watched. The entries grew more desperate, her handwriting becoming shaky as she described strange encounters, seeing the man standing in the woods, always watching, never speaking. Lily wrote about being taken to a safe place, though she didn't explain what or where it was. She described it in vague terms, saying it was somewhere hidden, away from everything she knew. The entries became scattered, as if her mind was racing, and the details were unsettling. She wrote, "I don't know where I am, but he says I'll be safe. He says he's helping me." The words felt haunting to anyone reading them, like a last, frightened plea frozen in time. The final entry was especially disturbing. It was dated just a few days after her last known sighting, and it read simply, "I have to go now. He says I'll be safe, but I'm scared." The words were scrawled in jagged handwriting, rushed, as if written in a hurry. It was the last entry in the journal, and it left more questions than answers. Who was the man in the shadows? Where had he taken her? And more importantly, how did her journal end up buried beneath an old oak tree? The journal's discovery shook the town to its core. For the first time in 30 years, there was new evidence that Lily had been alive after her disappearance, but the mystery of her fate remained unsolved. People began to wonder if they'd missed something back then, some crucial detail that could have led to her rescue. The questions were painful, especially for her family, who now grappled with the thought that Lily had been so close to home, yet so far from safety. The journal offered a glimpse into Lily's final days, but left detectives with even more to untangle. Speculation swirled in the town, and theories began to emerge. Some thought Lily had been lured away by a stranger, while others believed the man in the shadows might have been someone she knew. But without any leads on his identity or motives, the journal became both a beacon of hope and a reminder of the enduring darkness surrounding Lily's fate. The discovery of Lily's journal prompted police to scour the area near the oak tree where it had been found. This search led them to a derelict house not far from the edge of the forest, a house that had sat empty for years. Townspeople had largely ignored it, assuming it was just another abandoned property. But this house had a history of its own, and when detectives traced its ownership records, a troubling connection emerged. The property had once belonged to a man named Frank Dawson, a quiet, solitary figure who had lived there alone for decades until his death in the early 2000s. Most people in the town didn't remember much about him. He kept to himself, rarely left his property, and was known for doing odd jobs around town. His presence had been so inconspicuous that few had noticed when he was gone. However, police discovered a link that made Frank Dawson's story more unsettling. During the summer Lily disappeared, he had been employed as a handyman by the Thompsons, her family. Armed with a search warrant, investigators returned to Dawson's home, hoping to find some connection to Lily's disappearance. The house was decayed, with broken windows and peeling paint, its rooms layered in dust and the silence of years. At first glance, it appeared empty and unremarkable. But as detectives moved through the house, they discovered something chilling hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the back room, a concealed trapdoor leading to a small, windowless chamber. Inside this cramped space, it was clear that someone had once been there. The walls were painted with crude, childlike drawings, faded but still recognizable, pictures of trees, houses, and the figure of a girl with long hair, eerily resembling Lily. Scattered around the room were children's toys, small figurines, and an old, worn blanket in the corner. It looked like a makeshift bedroom. But the room was cold, dark, and suffocating, with no light or ventilation. The confined space sent a chill through the detectives. They could feel the weight of the memories trapped within those walls. Tests confirmed that Lily's DNA was present in the room. It was the first real proof that she had been held somewhere after her disappearance, perhaps against her will. The small room was a haunting discovery, an image of innocence twisted into captivity. It was as if time had frozen in that dark, hidden room, with all the objects lying exactly as they had been left. Investigators began to build a picture of Frank Dawson. His reclusive behavior, paired with his connection to the Thompson family, took on sinister undertones. He had no close friends or family members and had been largely isolated in his later years. However, records from neighboring towns revealed that he had a criminal record, charges related to child endangerment from his youth. The details were vague, but they painted a troubling history of past offenses, suggesting that Dawson might have been a predator long before Lily's disappearance. The room's discovery left investigators with haunting questions. Had Lily been held there the entire time? Had she ever tried to escape? The chilling implication was that Dawson had, at some point, gained Lily's trust, perhaps under the guise of protecting her. His work at her family's home gave him access and the opportunity to watch her, potentially even to gain her confidence. But there was no sign that anyone else had known what he was doing, and Dawson's secret seemed buried with him. As detectives combed through what remained of Dawson's belongings, they found no letters, no diary, nothing to explain his motives or Lily's fate after her time in the hidden room. Neighbors reported seeing him occasionally, doing yard work or taking out the trash, but none recalled ever seeing a child on the property. It seemed he had managed to keep whatever was happening within those walls completely hidden. The room shifted the investigation dramatically, but it didn't solve the mystery. Instead, it raised even more disturbing possibilities. Lily's drawings on the walls, her toys left behind, and the lingering traces of her presence were all that remained, hinting at a life interrupted and a child lost in the shadows of a man's twisted secrecy. Yet despite the room's horrifying contents, it still didn't answer the biggest question. Where had Lily gone after her time there? The search of Frank Dawson's property and the horrifying discovery of the hidden room provided disturbing new insights, but it left Lily's case full of unanswered questions. Investigators turned their focus to understanding Dawson's life more closely, hoping that his past might reveal why he had taken Lily and what had ultimately happened to her. They began by interviewing people who might have crossed paths with Dawson, tracing connections, and studying his history in neighboring towns. One of the few remaining pieces of evidence was an old, faded letter found tucked away in his belongings, addressed to him and dated several years before Lily's disappearance. The letter was from an institution in a nearby town, a juvenile correctional facility Dawson had been sent to in his early 20s. He had been placed there on charges related to child endangerment, though records were sparse, with most details lost to time or sealed away. The only details in his file suggested Dawson had been accused of luring children but hadn't served any prison time. The charges were dropped due to insufficient evidence, and he was released, free to build a new life in the quiet town where Lily's family had eventually hired him as a handyman. Investigators speculated that Dawson's past offenses might have gone unnoticed due to the lapse in criminal reporting across state lines back then. Without a comprehensive record system, the Thompsons would have had no reason to suspect him of anything sinister. But Dawson's job at their home gave him a disturbing level of access to their daily lives, and most disturbingly, to Lily. Records showed he had worked in their yard on numerous occasions, often alone, with the family trusting him to do small repairs and maintenance around the property. He had been a quiet figure, never drawing attention, blending into the background of their lives. As investigators dug further, they unearthed another chilling connection. During his brief employment, neighbors occasionally saw him watching children in the town park, lingering at playgrounds, or sitting alone, observing kids from a distance. These sightings hadn't raised any alarms at the time, but looking back, neighbors described feeling unsettled by his presence. What's more, there were reports from years earlier of children in nearby towns reporting a strange man who would talk to them, offering them candy or asking about their families. While the incidents never led to any serious accusations, the descriptions matched Dawson's appearance at the time, suggesting a pattern of behavior. The journal found near the oak tree suddenly took on new significance. Investigators began to believe Dawson may have been watching Lily for longer than anyone realized, maybe months or even years. The details in the journal, the way Lily referred to the man in the shadows, hinted at a period of surveillance and manipulation. Detectives suspected he might have gained her trust, slowly luring her with promises of safety and secrecy, a tactic that would explain her willingness to follow him without resistance. Forensic experts analyzing the journal found traces of substances on the pages, possibly remnants of a sedative, indicating that Dawson might have drugged Lily during her captivity. His reclusive nature, paired with his background, painted a chilling picture. Dawson wasn't just a stranger passing through town, he was a predator who had spent years hiding in plain sight, only to act on his fixation in the dead of night. One final piece of evidence unearthed in Dawson's property added yet another layer to the mystery. Hidden among his belongings was a photograph of a young girl who bore a striking resemblance to Lily. The photograph was old and faded, and though the face wasn't entirely clear, the resemblance was uncanny enough to raise suspicion. Detectives theorized that Dawson's obsession with Lily might have been rooted in an event from his past, perhaps the loss of a family member or even an earlier crime. It was possible that he had seen Lily as a replacement, someone he could mold into the image of this other girl he had lost or been obsessed with years ago. But there was one major roadblock: Dawson was dead, and with him the last of his secrets. The family of the girl in the photograph, if she'd ever existed, couldn't be traced. Without any living connections to reveal his motives, Dawson became more of an enigma, a shadowy figure who had inflicted trauma but left no clear motives or explanations behind. Investigators faced the agonizing reality that they might never understand the full story behind his actions or Lily's fate after her time in the hidden room. The small town, once so serene, was rocked by the unsettling knowledge that this man had lived among them for years, unnoticed and unchallenged. For Lily's family, the discoveries added yet another dimension of horror to her disappearance. The realization that someone they had trusted had betrayed them in the most horrific way possible was almost too much to bear. They now grappled with the possibility that Lily had suffered under Dawson's care and manipulation. Yet without the ability to question him or uncover further evidence, they remained trapped in a nightmare of unanswered questions and lingering guilt. The haunting image of Dawson's hidden room, Lily's drawings, and the secrets buried in the journal remained, but there was still no trace of what had happened to her in the years following her captivity. Each revelation only added to the labyrinthine mystery, creating a puzzle with missing pieces that seemed destined never to be found. The town struggled to come to terms with the chilling revelations surrounding Lily's case, but the investigation had all but stalled. Without new evidence, her disappearance seemed destined to remain an unsolved mystery. Lily's family, devastated by years of heartbreak, tried to move forward, holding on to the memories they had of her as a bright, loving child. Yet her mother Margaret couldn't shake the feeling that there were still secrets left to uncover. Determined to find closure, she began visiting nearby towns and looking into records herself, desperate to fill in the missing pieces of Lily's story. Several months into her search, Margaret encountered an online forum where people shared stories of missing persons and discussed unsolved mysteries. To her surprise, she found a post about a young girl named Emily Reed who had gone missing 2 decades earlier in a town only 50 miles from where Lily had disappeared. Margaret stared at the photo attached to the post. Feeling her heart race, the girl in the photo looked eerily similar to Lily. With trembling hands, she reached out to the family listed in the post, arranging to meet with them in hopes of understanding the connection. The Reeds were a quiet, elderly couple who welcomed Margaret with compassion and shared their story. Emily had been their granddaughter, who had gone missing while playing in their backyard. The Reeds had looked everywhere, but like Lily, Emily had seemed to vanish without a trace. Margaret showed them a picture of Lily, and the couple gasped at the resemblance. There was something hauntingly familiar in Lily's eyes, a likeness that seemed more than coincidental. The families realized that both girls' disappearances shared troubling similarities. Both had been taken from their homes without signs of forced entry, and both had left behind only vague, eerie clues. The Reeds mentioned that Emily had once spoken about a friend who watched over her in the woods, someone she called Mr. Franklin. Margaret froze at the name. It was too close to Frank Dawson, Lily's captor, to ignore. The discovery made it seem all too likely that Dawson had been involved in Emily's disappearance years before Lily's. Fueled by this new lead, Margaret took the information to the police, who reopened Emily's case in tandem with Lily's. Investigators searched old records and found that Dawson had indeed lived near Emily's town before moving to Margaret's. He had changed his name and quietly started a new life, slipping under the radar in each town. Police now believed that Dawson had been moving from town to town, possibly for decades, preying on young girls before moving on and covering his tracks. With his history obscured, Dawson had managed to evade suspicion, escaping justice each time. But the revelations didn't end there. As part of the reopened investigation, the police decided to examine Dawson's property once more. They combed through every corner, determined not to miss anything this time. In an abandoned shed buried under layers of dirt and old junk, detectives unearthed another chilling find, a small metal box containing locks of hair, each carefully labeled with a girl's name and a date. Among them were locks labeled Emily and Lily, both dated within days of their disappearances. The discovery was devastating. It confirmed that Dawson had been keeping tokens of his victims, evidence that he had likely taken more girls than anyone realized. The box also contained a single, faded photograph of Dawson himself, standing with a young girl who looked strikingly similar to both Lily and Emily. This photograph, taken years earlier, hinted at a twisted obsession, a pattern of fixation on young girls that spanned decades. The FBI was brought into the case, suspecting that Dawson may have been responsible for other unsolved disappearances in surrounding states. Forensic experts examined each lock of hair and identified 3 additional girls who had gone missing over a span of 20 years, each from different small towns. Each discovery painted a darker picture of Dawson's life, revealing him as a calculated predator who had created a pattern of taking girls who resembled one another, possibly driven by a deep-seated fixation or unresolved trauma. For Lily's family, the revelations were both horrifying and relieving. They now had an understanding, albeit a terrible one, of what had likely happened to Lily. Margaret felt a grim peace knowing that they had uncovered the truth, even if it was not the answer she had hoped for. Her daughter's memory was no longer hidden away in the shadows of a cold case. Lily's story, painful as it was, had finally come to light. As news of Dawson's crime spread, the small town mourned for Lily, for Emily, and for all the other young girls whose lives had been stolen. The community erected a memorial at the edge of the woods in their honor, a simple stone with the names of the known victims, a reminder of the innocence that had been taken and the darkness that had lingered in their midst. For Margaret and Tom, the pain remained, but so did a sense of justice. They visited the memorial often, leaving flowers for Lily, hoping that wherever she was, she had found peace. And as for the town, it carried the memory of Lily and the other girls forward, keeping their stories alive, a lasting reminder of the dangers that sometimes hide closest to home. The mystery of Lily's fate was finally solved, but the scars remained, forever etched into the fabric of the town and in the hearts of all who remembered her.